Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to another evening. It's dark. It's night. It's like 10:25 at night of bland gaming. Let's talk about GMing tonight again. Okay, so I am currently running two campaigns right now. I'm running a Coriolis campaign and I'm running a Genlab Alpha campaign. We've kind of taken a break because of this whole pandemic thing. But I wanted to talk to you tonight about Genlab Alpha in particular. I have been seeing a lot of stuff online about people running Genlab Alpha campaigns, and it's like I told you, I am not the greatest GM of all time, but I definitely took the meat and potatoes out of the Genlab Alpha, and I went ahead and added some of my own gravy, changed the campaign, and changed some of the rules and everything. So I wanted to let you all know what I did in order to kind of spice things up a little bit and maybe give you some tips if you're getting ready to GM it yourself. Now, like I've said before, Genlab Alpha, this book right here is very hard to come by, but you can go ahead and get the PDF from Free League. You can get it, I think, on Drive-Thru RPG. And if you get the PDF of this, it's going to work. I always like getting the books and everything, but if this book is not available right now, if you wanted to get the PDF, you could certainly make it work. And then I would also highly recommend, if you haven't seen it already, watch my other Mutant Year Zero video and everything where I talk about the basics of it and look into investing in the other books and everything. So I currently own a number. Oh, geez, I got to keep this under 20 minutes again because my marketing wife has told me that I need to work at that and everything. So we better get on the move for this and everything. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. But I do have a lot to go over with what I did with this campaign here. Now, before we get started, I want to give a warning out. There's a ton of spoilers that are going to be in this video here. So if you are not a GM, if you plan on playing the Genlab Alpha campaign, this is the time for you to turn this off and go play Left 4 Dead 2. Okay, because right now, I'm going to have major spoilers as far as the campaign in this video here. Secondly, the drink for the evening is I picked a glass of Chardonnay. The reason why is because I've got some COVID weight, which I have found out is equal to my Christmas weight. I gain weight every year between November and December, and then I wind up burning it off in January and February with working out and whatnot. But my Christmas weight is now equal to my COVID weight. So no more beer and old fashions. I'm drinking the old fashioned Chardonnay and everything. So anyway, without further ado, and just as a reminder, again, I don't claim to be the greatest GM of all time, but I do want to remind all of you, especially that snarky guy that left a comment on one of my other videos. I am indeed the number one dad. And I am the best dad ever. I've actually been given this by my own children and everything, who are the best judges of who indeed is the best dad ever. So again, I don't claim to be the best GM of all time, but I am certainly, according to my kids, the best dad ever. And I have a trophy to prove it. So there. Anyway, let's talk about Genlab Alpha. Okay, so when I bought the Mutant games, the Genlab Alpha setting really perplexed me the most. The reason why I liked it is I am a child of the 80s. I'm old. And this, years ago, there were two games that really had an influence on me. One was Gamma World, which was in which you could play anthropomorphic animals and everything. You could also play humanoids and what have you. That was really my first experience with a post-apocalyptic setting, and I really enjoyed it. My favorite characters to play when I played that game or when I ran that game, there were these little mutated raccoons that were called dabbers and everything, and I thought they were so freaking cool. And the illustrations and the artwork in that game were so cool with the mutated animals. So that was really my favorite class to play and everything. So that had influence on me. There was another game made by Palladium Books. It was called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. Now, I grew up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but not what you guys are thinking. I did not grow up with the stupid, hokey children's cartoon. I grew up with the comic books and what have you, and the role playing game where it was very brutal. It was very gritty. It was very cool. They made a role playing game based off of it where you would play mutated animals, and I thought that was just a hoot. We played that a little bit, me and my friends and everything. So when the Genlab Alpha came out, needless to say, the furry thing was not on my mind. I understand that this one of the reasons why this is so popular right now is because this furry culture is very popular right now. That's not my cup of tea. That's not my bag. I don't judge, but furries are not my thing. I'm more thinking of the 1980s Gamma World and the old school Palladium Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other strangeness. You can probably Google it and get some really sweet illustrations and everything. So let's talk about Genlab Alpha really quick. I'm not going to go over the rules. I'm going to assume that you know the rules because I really want to keep this as short as possible and tell you the difference between the campaign and kind of what I added to it. So I'm going to be going into this again. Spoilers. So if you have not read the campaign, if you're planning on playing the campaign, proceed at your own risk. So one of the things that that I did when I was reading this campaign about Genlab Alpha, there were the very first thing that I did that was very different in this was the Scry character. So in our group, our Scry character, our seer, is a moose character. And there are certainly some good rules in here on how to handle the Scry character, but me and the moose player, we kind of put our heads together and everything, and we said, look, you know, I am a big plot player. I am a big plot GM, and so I map out a lot of the story ahead of time and what have you. So what we decided instead, we forego the rules for the Scry in this game. And what we wound up doing was we said, okay, well, look, whenever you make your Scry character, when you make your Scry role, that is, let's go ahead and I will have his character have a vision. And he chose to play like a moose, like a mutated moose. And we had this, we both came up with these two-pronged idea of his character, where he would have visions, and it would essentially be the Great Spirit or God that would be coming to his character and talking to his character in the form of Bullwinkle the Moose. And although it may seem comedic and funny and what have you, you know, we surmised that he had seen a picture of like a Bullwinkle playground or a campground or something like that when he was around Genlab Alpha, and that was his inspiration. And even though it was in fact the Great Spirit that was speaking to him, it was choosing the form of Bullwinkle the Moose. So we had this, and the way that I GM'd it was not silly. It was very serious, but we did like the idea of it being Bullwinkle the Moose. The second thing that we did was he had what he called his bag of bones. And we actually had a physical prop. I'm very big into physical props in Genlab, or in Mutant Year Zero, I should say, in the sense that we gave him a little bag that was filled with Legos, and these were what he called his bones, and very reminiscent of the scene in Willow where he consults the bones and he throws the bones out and then he reads them and tells their fortune and stuff like that. What was really cool was this player took this bag of these Legos, and he had Legos in this bag, and he would throw these Legos out, and then what I would do is I would, looking at seeing at which Legos landed where, I would give him hints to, if he made his roll, give him hints about what things were going to happen long term in the campaign, and yet, you know, keeping it very non-specific, but giving hints and everything. The other thing that I did with his character when he would make his Scry roll is I would have him have visions, and it enabled me to allow him to have cutscenes of the Watchers speaking to each other, the Watchers that were talking about what was going on. And so it was very cool because in a movie you kind of see the cutscenes of what the bad guys are doing and things like that. and it allowed me to share the part of the story with them about what was going on with the bad guys while they were doing their things and everything. And he would always be standing there where they couldn't see him, they couldn't react to him and everything, but he would be standing there with Bullwinkle and watching these events go on and everything with the Watchers, or with the tribes, or whatever's going on in the actual scene there. But I do like, I actually, so I have kids that have a metric ton of Legos. So I actually got a little Crown Royal pouch and filled it with Legos and handed it to my player, and he would throw them out there, and then I would fit it to fit my narrative and everything whenever he would throw these Legos down. And it really worked well. And this player was great. And what was really cool was when we first started playing, I would sit there and I would give him, I would read the Legos, and then what I found very interesting is as we played on, he would roll the Legos out, and then he would start making up things about what he saw in the Legos, and then I would add things to it to kind of keep him on track as far as what was going on with the story. So that was my first major change, was the way that we did the scry character, the seer character, and what have you. The second thing that we did is I really liked the Planet of the Apes movie where they're signing and then they're also talking. So the big story change that I did with that was that logically I said, okay, well, let's say that the Watchers, the very first animals that they taught how to speak, or that the humans taught how to speak before they left and everything, was the apes. It makes sense. Apes are most closest to humans and everything, and that obviously we've already, in our current time, we've taught apes to speak with sign. So that was something that I went ahead and did with it, was that I said, okay, well, maybe before they actually genetically bred them to speak and everything, they actually taught these apes to go ahead and speak in sign. And so what I did is sign language is something that is known by all of the apes from their early origins, and it is not called sign language, it's called ape speak. And it's because of the fact that the apes were the first ones to be taught it and what have you. Obviously, the Watchers can speak ape speak, and then all of the apes, in addition to being able to speak normally, they're able to speak in sign. I was very, very inspired by the most recent Planet of the Apes movies, where they're both speaking themselves, but then there's a lot of sign language as well. So I really thought that was cool, and I wanted to incorporate that somehow. So, and I'll get further into how the ape speak kind of plays into the plot. We do have an ape player in our group, and he was a scavenger named Oppenheimer. He is a veteran player. He's one of my favorite players and stuff. He's very good with story arcs and with story. He's not a murder hobo or anything crazy like that. He's a very, very story-based player and everything. So having his player play an orangutan who could speak the ape speak really worked well for us. So anyway, that was another major change and everything. So as far as the campaign itself, so what I did in the campaign, I really liked this idea of, and we'll just talk about the Watchers really quick. So I love the idea of these observers, but I liked the idea that they had the human faces and everything to make them more personable to the animals, to make them more likable by the humans. The other thing that I did with my observers was I had with the drones here, I almost had them more mindless along with the sentinels. So, in other words, when they had patrols out, I would have like 2 or 3 sentinels or the drones or what have you would be flying the aerial perimeter, but I always had an observer there. There always had to be someone that could think. And that was how I treated my observers. The other thing I did with the observers is that the observers, instead of having very funky names, I always had them as kind of almost like butlers, very well-mannered, well-behaved, and I always gave them very sophisticated sounding names. The two biggest NPCs in my group right now, there's Alfred, who is one of these, and the players haven't met either of these characters yet. The only way that they know about them is through the seer's cutscenes and everything. So Alfred is kind of the right-hand man, so to speak, of the young lady who is controlling Genlab Alpha. So he's kind of, and he's ruthless. Alfred is ruthless. He's very unfeeling. He's very uncaring and everything. But he's always proper. He's always very polite and what have you. And then I created a second character that I called Vincent. And Vincent is interesting. Vincent, and gosh, I mean, I don't want to go into a hour and a half long video of telling you what their story arc was, but Vincent is the robot that he's the observer that is programmed to observe things, and he's programmed to learn and what have you. And without getting too mushy and everything, what happens is that Vincent actually, in one of the scenes, he actually gets his hand on, of all things, a King James Bible. And Vincent reads the Bible, and he kind of learns the moral lessons from it. And Vincent starts having doubts, and he starts generating independent thought and things like that. And this is what troubles Alfred greatly. And in a lot of the cutscenes that the seer gets to watch, and in essence the players get to watch, is the conflict between Alfred's bloodthirsty cold-heartedness, and then Vincent almost is going on his journey where he's becoming more and more human. He's becoming more compassionate and everything. And he's also starting to logically question the methods of the Watchers and stuff like that. I don't know, we're my biggest strength in my games that I run is that I run very heavy story arcs. But one of the problems that I'm really starting to work on is not running the campaign on rails and everything. I am very much looking forward to my players meeting Vincent and perhaps even befriending him. Maybe Vincent is somebody that becomes part of their arc when they finally leave Genlab Alpha. I don't know. But I'm very anxious to develop the relationship, the continued rivalry between Alfred and Vincent, but then also the potential friendship, or maybe even Vincent becomes an ally and everything to the players and whatnot. So anyway, and then the way that I began my campaign, and I'm sorry I'm scatterbrained, it's late at night and I've got a glass of wine in me already, but the way that I started my campaign was I had all the different players, I had all of them starting out in different locations. I actually had a pretty big group. I have 6 players. My problem is pretty unique in the sense that I have too many friends that are wonderful role players, which is why I'm running 2 campaigns right now, is because I'm trying to mix them out and trying to involve everyone and what have you. So anyway, the campaign started with, we had a bison character and a moose character, which were both part of the Moose Clan. And the moose character had a vision that Bullwinkle told him that he was to take a pilgrimage over down by the edge of the fence and what have you, and that he would be given a sign. And the other players, just by happenstance, made up going down there and finding their way. Now, our ape character, who's named Oppenheimer, he was a scavenger character. And one of the things that I also like to do in Genlab Alpha was when they found artifacts, I would not tell them what the artifacts were. I would hand them the artifacts and let them play out how they would interact with it. For instance, in one instance, Oppenheimer found a half bottle of Jack Daniels, and what was absolutely hysterical was he was like explaining to one of our cat characters how marvelous this object was, and he poured the Jack Daniels out on the ground, and they said, you see, you can put anything you want in this. You can put water in it. You can put whatever in it. And what was hilarious was that he had poured this Jack Daniels out, which was priceless, because it would never be made again and everything. And then yet he was, trying to convince her that the miraculousness of it was the bottle. There was another time where they discovered an SUV that had a family of, it had skeletons in it, and in the back seat there was what I called, obviously it was someone of importance because she was sitting on some sort of a throne, but it was a much smaller human. It was a much smaller skeleton and everything, and it was, it was a child in a car seat and everything. And then she was clutching a sacred book, and then Oppenheimer takes the book. Reading. We assume that the majority of the characters can't read. It would be something that the watchers would consider dangerous and what have you. But Oppenheimer had learned how to. He's our scavenger ape character. He had learned how to read and everything. So, in the, in this little tiny skeleton that is in this throne that's in the back seat of this chariot and everything, and it was a child that was in a car seat, and I didn't say that, but the way you describe it to the characters and everything, it makes them really kind of have to guess and everything what it was. And what was really cool is, they all smiled and they all, they understood what was going on, and that this little skeleton was holding a sacred book, and he takes it, and then when he takes the book and everything, he's like, well, what does it say? I literally handed him a copy of my daughter's copy of Where the Wild Things Are, which was also appropriate because they're in Genlab Alpha. And what was awesome was this player goes through and he's looking at the pictures and he's explaining to the other players what it says. And he's not reading the story. He's telling it in the words of how Oppenheimer would explain this story to him. It was a very cool moment and whatnot. So anyway, in the campaign, one of the antagonists is a bear called Traffault. And Traffault is kind of the leader of the resistance. And with Traffault, so what they have is they've got this picture. They've got this picture of this helicopter here, which is a much smaller helicopter. And what I did is I described it more as a CH-46 or a Chinook, much larger helicopter and everything, where he could have his headquarters in and stuff. So in the original story arc, that Traffault had come up to the edge of the fence, and he had seen some humans, and they were vaporized by the drones, and that was what convinced him that that this was wrong, and that they needed to resist the Watchers and try and get out. I really liked that idea, but I didn't want that to be Traffault's experience. I wanted that to be my player's experience. So, for one reason or another, all the different groups of players, I think I had them in 3 different groups. They all had been drawn to the edge of the fence and everything, and in particular the Moose character was told that he'd be given a great sign. And so what winds up happening is whether it's a down satellite, whether it was a meteor, whether it was a crashed space station, whatever, this big fireball comes out of the sky and it hits right outside the fence. So they all run down there, and they're all the players get a chance to meet each other and what have you. And then right at the moment that they're sitting there looking at this big fire that's on the other side of the fence, there are 3 humans, or 3 humanoids, I should say, that have also come in, and they've been drawn to this fire and everything. And what was very fun was they were wrapped up in bandages, from the top to bottom and what have you, with their faces and what have you. I had a very dramatic moment, and I played this song. It's from one of the Transformers movies. It's really not a good movie, but more than once I've had really good soundtracks come from awful movies. But the song is called Tessa, and I'll include the link in this video here. And I played the Tessa song by Steve Jablonski, I think is the way you pronounce his name. Anyway, so I played this song while they're meeting, while they're taking their bandages off and everything, the wraps off of their faces. And this is the first time that our animal characters have seen human beings and whatnot. And it's a man who is, he's a mutant, and then his wife, who is his own ghoul. So she's pale and she's very white and everything, which also allows them to breed. And then they have a child that's with them. And I think the man's name was Adam, and the girl's name was Rachel, and then the child's name was Eve. Well, Eve is deaf. She's not able to speak. She can't hear. So she is speaking in sign with her parents. Her parents and her mother is also deaf, and the Zongul. And so they are speaking in sign back and forth, which absolutely thrills Oppenheimer because he can actually speak to them in sign as well. But the father can speak normally. So anyway, he's almost the father is almost in tears at meeting these animals and seeing them at the edge of the fence and everything, because these are the first human voices that the first voices that he's heard in since he can remember, and he wants to know, can they come in, and how can they get out and everything. And then the players are just interacting with their first meeting of humans. It's like standing for them before God and everything. So it's this incredible experience, and my players really, they were wonderful in the way that they interacted with them. So right about when the players started to really get emotionally attached to, and the one thing is that the mother is signing that it's a miracle because they've been alone for so long, and now they meet these people and they meet these animals that can talk and everything, and she's just talking about how it's such a miracle. And right about when my players get really attached to these people, they're trying to figure out how to get through the fence and everything, that's when I hit them with the drones come by. And I remember Marlene, my cat player, she screams, get down, run, run, run. And it's too late. They wind up getting vaporized and everything, except for the little girl, Eve. And so the parents, the little girl runs for cover and survives it, but the parents they get killed by the drones. And then as the drones are going away, Eve is on the other side of the fence, and it's this very dramatic moment where Oppenheimer is signing to the girl. He's saying, just stay alive, we'll figure out a way, we'll come and find you. And then Eve is signing that she's all alone, all alone, and then she shrieks and she screams, and the lights flicker on and off, and then the drones come back to her, and the players are all stressing out because they think the drones are going to kill Eve. And then Eve gives this big shriek and scream, and I played this song from the Oblivion soundtrack by M83 is wonderful. And I played this song from it called I'm Sending You Back during this scene. And again, I'll include the link here. So anyway, Eve phases, much like Kitty Pryde from the X-Men and everything. So she shrieks, and as she's shrieking, the lights flicker on and off, and then the drones themselves actually lose all power and plunge down to the ground, and then Eve goes running through the fence as if it's not there, and then collapses on the other side of the fence. And that's when the cat player runs out and picks Eve up. And as they bring Eve back over, the healer sees that she's bleeding out of her ears. And the reason why she can't hear is because every time she uses her ability, it winds up, it's going to kill her eventually. So she can't keep doing it and everything. But she has the ability, much like Kitty Pryde from the X-Men, where she can phase, and then she can also go through and short out electronics and things, which obviously is of great benefit in this world here where they're being dominated by the Watchers and what have you. So the entire plot line of the campaign is centered around Eve, which is this very Messiah-like character. And the players took to her immediately. They loved her. And I used the girl from the last Planet of the Apes movie. I can't remember what I think Nova is her name from the most recent Planet of the Apes. I used her as an inspiration and represent Eve. And Eve, I had my daughter color these pictures of, I said, draw yourself with an ape, and she colored a picture with an ape, and then I said, yeah, okay, now color yourself with a big lynx, and so she colored this picture. And then what I did was Eve had these crayons that she was playing with, and I literally handed the players these pictures that my daughter had colored and everything, and I said, yeah, she hands this to you because it's a gift for you, and she hands it to him. My players frickin' loved it. They thought it was so cool. So then, how do we involve Traffault? Okay, so when Traffault comes into the whole picture, I did not have Traffault. His inspiration was not that he had seen the humans, because I already gave that to them, and they have Eve, and they know that the Watchers are looking for Eve, because again, my Moose character is having visions of them seeing the spot where the drones fell out of the sky, and they know that something happened there. So what I did with Traffault is Traffault's inspiration was that he learned how to read. And so in the back of this helicopter, which again I used like a Chinook helicopter, a much larger helicopter with much more space in it and everything. And again, a group of us, I've got 2 veterans in my group. I spent a little bit of time in the Marine Corps and everything, so we're all very familiar with what this, what a Chinook helicopter looks like. If you don't know what it looks like, just Google it, or I would recommend that you use like a CH4, like a Super Stallion as well, is a much better helicopter to use for Traffault's lair and everything. A much bigger, much more roomy and everything is a helicopter. So anyway, so what we did with Traffault is that I still had Traffault meet them through his niece and everything, and then when she brings them back to this helicopter, we find out that Traffault has learned how to read, and Traffault is very inspired by reading books about history, and he is very interested in the fact that the humans have had to stand up against their Watchers, and Traffault is very interested in the American Revolution. And he's very interested in World War II. He's very interested in a lot of these struggles for independence and civil rights. And what I did is I have a whole bunch of history books of my own at home. And so what I did was, as Traffault is explaining to them about his moment where he learned to go ahead and resist, and that I read quotes from George Washington, I read quotes from Abraham Lincoln, I read quotes from George Patton, Martin Luther King, what have you. And as I read these, I Googled all these quotes and I wrote them down for myself. And as I read each quote, I would hand them a book. Like, I have a book about the American Revolution, I have a book about Martin Luther King, I have a book about World War II, and I would open the book up and act like I was reading it from that book, but I was reading a predetermined quote that I had already Googled off the internet and everything. And there's a song called Raven Rock from the Oblivion soundtrack that I went ahead and played while I was reading these about, all people are created equal and what have you. And my players found it very inspiring. And so what my players wound up doing is they left Eve with Traffault, and then they went out and started to do the recruiting, and they were looking for the EMP rifle and what have you. The only other thing I can tell you before I bring the video to an end is their experience with the dogs, the dog camp and everything. They went out to the dog camp, and I really wanted the dog camp. The camps themselves are drawn in there's some really good art, and like I've always said, make sure you buy the map for all these role-playing games and everything, because the maps are just great. The map of Genlab Alpha was out there, and then on the back of the Genlab Alpha map, there's a map of all the different sanctuaries of where all the different animal tribes are. So the only thing I did was I took the dog area and I made it much bigger. And I want to describe to you, I wrote this down once, and I want to read it to you really quick. So this is how I described it when I was posting something on the on a Mutant Year Zero Facebook page and everything that I'm a member of and everything. So, and then this is me describing the Dog Lodge. So the lodge is a hub for trade and activity, so it was busy. The lodge has electricity, so some crude lighting has been established. The fence is lined with Christmas lights, and speakers brought out into the courtyard booms music. The dogs loved AC/DC, so upon the character approach, Shook Me All Night Long is blaring. Now you can bet that I took my AC/DC Back in Black CD, and I was playing that during this scene. Okay, so continuing. Since no one but dogs are allowed to stay inside the complex, a tent city of traitors and thieves has set up outside the wall. The main gate is guarded by 2 large wolves smoking cigarettes and carrying rusted shotguns. So all the dogs in my world are smokers because that's one of the gifts that the Watchers give them because they're collaborators. And then the dogs are also very well armed. I have them much better armed, I think, than they're portrayed in the book. But most of their weapons and everything are not like the Elysium level weapons, but like things like shotguns, machine guns, rifles, things like that. Anyway, a boot at the gatehouse houses an obese Saint Bernard who checks weapons, maintains a ledger, and denies or approves entry depending on the character's stated business. In the courtyard, there are tables with traders in a flea market style. There's bonfires and barbecue available if you can afford it. If you're looking for something stronger, a camp trailer has been converted into a bar called The Good Boy. Grog, whiskey, moonshine, all can be ordered from the window. On a crude stage made of junk and debris, Gagarin sits in a place of authority. He's the master trader, and only the richest and most clever scavengers trade with him. There's loud voices and even drunken fights, but anything that gets out of hand gets thrown out by the brute squad of wolves. High above the revelry, Leica watches from the balcony of her suite. Dogs, and that was something I really wanted, was I wanted her to be up there, almost like in Mad Max, where he's up there, the newest Mad Max and everything, where he's up there and everyone's kind of yelling up to him and everything. And I wanted Leica to be up there, like sipping champagne and watching all of this kind of huge, almost like a block party going on down below her. Anyway, dogs raise their glasses to her from below, and with a cigar in one hand, she raises her rocks glass, which usually contains champagne or fine whiskey, to toast the party below and everything. So that was how I pictured the dog's encampment and everything. So I pictured it a little bit bigger and whatnot, and really, I'm sorry, I'm not even paying attention when I'm filming here. I'm just kind of rambling on and whatnot, but I pictured it much bigger than it's portrayed in the book and everything. And then, of course, they went through and they obtained the EMP rifle, and my players are now at the point where they've just taken the EMP rifle back to Traffault and everything, and now they're getting ready to go on their second route. The other thing that I did that was out of the ordinary, that was not in the campaign itself, was I really, if you've ever played the computer game Mutant Year Zero, I really enjoyed the character of Dux, and I wanted to include him in my campaign. So the other thing that I did that was out of the ordinary, that's not in the campaign here, was I established they met Dux. And the way that they met Dux was there was a group of crocodiles that were getting ready to eat him, some mutated crocodiles that were from the reptile tribe. And what they did is they met, they saw him and he was tied up, and they had to fight these crocodiles to get him free. And here he is, this mutated duck. Now, the way that I portrayed Dux was he was a very foul-mouthed. I swore a lot, and I had him talk in a very kind of a New York type of accent and everything, and he was always constantly swearing, and every other word was like the F word and whatnot and everything. So Dux is, he's kind of always talking like this and everything, and everything almost like some guy from Boston or something like that. So anyway, so with Dux, they wind up releasing him, and he says, okay, well, hey, I'll tell you what, I'll pay you guys back, and I owe you one. Come back to my area here, and they find out that Dux is actually from a different Genlab. He's from Genlab Charlie, and he's escaped several times, and they've moved him to Genlab Alpha, and you find out that at Genlab Charlie, the majority of the animals there are birds and everything, but they've moved Dux to Genlab Alpha because he's constantly escaping, and the Watchers are losing their patience with him and what have you. So Dux is very much a scavenger character. He has all sorts of gadgets and collection of things and stuff, so the Oppenheimer character immediately became enamored with him. And then what I love doing was, as a reward for them, he hands them a roll of duct tape. And when I hand them the duct tape, I hand my players the duct tape. And what was awesome was the players all acted out how their characters would react to it and everything. And what I thought was very funny was the Lynx character. She was, Dux was sitting there and just rambling on and on and on, and she finally figures out how to work the masking, the masking tape, and she actually tears a piece off of it and sticks the tape on my mouth as I'm playing out Dux. And it was absolutely marvelous. It was a wonderful moment and everything. So Dux also, the big thing about Dux is that he wants no part of this revolution. He wants no part of this big, this big resistance that they're getting ready to form and everything. And so he's very much this anti-hero that they're going to have to later convince. The other thing that I gave kind of a spoiler and everything with Dux is Dux has a seaplane that he has completely restored, and he calls it the Duck, and he knows he can't fly it. His plan is to try and escape Genlab Alpha in this seaplane, which is hidden in this glade where his lair is and whatnot. But he knows that he can't escape because the drones are constantly patrolling the air. So he's trying to figure out a way to get the drones to be... and they didn't... Interestingly enough, the characters did not tell Dux about Eve. So he did not... they said, hey, why don't you come back with us, meet this bear, and we'll all get out of here. And, I remember Dux was playing, hey, good luck with your revolution, but that's really not my kind of thing, all right? Here's your tape, and go on and be on your way. And what I really am hoping to use Dux in the future is the scoundrel that winds up having a heart of gold, and maybe he comes and saves them or helps them in the last minute. And I would like Dux and his seaplane to play a pivotal role later on in the campaign, but we'll wait and we'll see what happens with it and everything. So, well, that's about as far as I am in my campaign here. The only other thing that I'll tell you that I've done is that I've really enjoyed having the original, even though you can play this book completely independently. The last piece of advice that I would give you, well, two more pieces of advice I would give you, and the one piece of advice I'd give you is I enjoyed having the first Mutant Year Zero book so that I have access to more artifacts and things like that. So I did do that. The second thing I would tell you is I got these out here. My group, every single player in my group went out and bought the dice. We really bought the dice. We like the dice because you can use... It's so much easier to go, okay, these are my stat dice, these are my skill dice, and then this is my gear dice. And it's having it color-coded and everything, it's so doggone convenient. Rather than trying to have your own six-sided dice and, well, wait, which one is the malfunction dice? Because ones on all of them don't necessarily mean failures and whatnot. So all of my group went out and bought the dice. I recommend that all of your group do that. You don't... For running Genlab Alpha, you don't necessarily need the screen. I love having the screen, but I'll tell you that get the book, get the map, get the dice. The screen I'll leave up to you. I would also recommend you pick up the first book. Pick up the first book anyway because it's a freaking great game all on its own. But then having the first book there where you can look at the mutant powers in there, and then also it gives you twice as many artifacts because a lot of the artifacts that are in the table in this book here are not in that first book there. So that's where we're at. I don't know what... I'm kind of playing this by ear. I have a feeling that at the very end of my campaign, it's going to end with one of two things, and I'm really trying not to run it on rails. But I'm also not a complete open sandbox type of player either. But I think one of the two things that's going to happen in my campaign is that either one of the players is going to, instead of having Traffault be the one that is kidnapped, it's definitely going to be Eve. Eve is going to be kidnapped and she's going to be taken away into Genlab Alpha, and they're going to have to save her. I haven't decided if it's going to end with one of the players sealing themselves in with the what's her name, Beatrice, I think is her name, with the intelligence and blowing her up, or I may even have Eve sacrifice herself by doing an EMP and then having it be the final one where she actually dies from it. I don't know yet. We'll have to see. I would like to think that, you know, the animals wind up taking away Eve and she becomes almost their queen, so to speak, when they venture out into the world and whatnot. The other thing the other idea that I had is with General Rudis. General Rudis, I really picture him almost like from the Man of Steel, the Zod type of character, where he is dedicated to his clan so much so that he's lost all sense of morality. Like, I'm very much looking forward to when General Rudis, when the players approach him thinking that he's possibly going to be an ally, General Rudis has no emotional connection to Eve, and he only sees her as an asset. And, you know, I can't wait to have him coldly explain to the players that, you know, no matter how cruel I seem, no matter how awful I seem, you know, what I do is all for the benefit of my people. And what General Rudis is going to try and do, there's a scene I have planned in my head where I want to have the players approach the rabbits to kind of enlist them in the resistance, and they wind up getting captured, and maybe somehow they get their hands on Eve. I don't know. But I have this vision of this scene in my head where he's commanding. They have a damaged robot that he wants Eve to use as to use her EMP on to short it out. But if she does it, it may very well kill her. And you know, the players are bound and forced to watch this, and they're screaming and what have you. And maybe General Rudis takes, you know, he says, well, which is her favorite? And then he takes that player, maybe it's Oppenheimer, or she's bonded with the cat character, she's bonded with a badger character quite enough. She calls the badger character the angry mouse and everything, because she can't say the words and everything. So that's how she describes him when she signs. And maybe he takes these blunderbusses that they have, and he shoots right next to their heads and everything, and tells her that he's going to kill them unless she shorts out this and everything. But if she does it, then she's going to wind up getting killed herself, and it's going to force the players to have to reason with General Rudis. And I think it's going to be just a wonderful moment there and everything. And I can't wait to see how my players handle it, and how I handle it with acting out as General Rudis. But I don't see General Rudis as a good guy. I see him as a very brutal, pragmatic, almost to a with a complete lack of empathy, where he's leading his people and doing what he believes is best for his people, and he doesn't mind the suffering of others in order to benefit for his people and everything. So anyway, listen, I apologize. I know I really rambled on this one, and I went kind of all over the place and what have you. My campaign is not completely over yet. The one thing that we have not messed with yet is the actual insurgency that is run. We haven't messed with that very much. I've been running it very much from the first person yet. I think this is a really interesting idea, but I don't know what we're going to do with this yet. One of my players has read this. We've discussed it, and we've discussed the pluses and minuses of it. I think it's really interesting. I like the idea of having the insurgency having finite resources, and then also having the watchers having the finite resources. But I generally oppose games where role-playing games where it turns into a board game where it's me versus my players, because ultimately I'm rooting for my players. So I don't like playing directly against them, because what if you win? You know what I mean? Then it's no fun for anyone. But there's some really cool things going on with the insurgency mechanic here. I can't give you any advice on it yet, because I haven't really gotten into the meat of it or really started running it. I just kind of tried to show you some of the story arcs that I run here. I know this was an amazing video to watch, but thanks for tuning in. I'm trying to keep it boring and to the level. Hopefully I gave you some ideas about what I've done. I know I've probably forgotten something. Because of COVID, we are just now starting to play again, and we're playing in small groups here and everything. We don't do online. We don't do Discord or anything like that. So we play face to face. So we're just now starting to get back into our campaign, which I haven't been running since March or so. So anyway, let me know. It's pretty funny too. My players. I did include, in addition to Traffault's niece. We did have Ringo here, and my players did not trust him from the very get-go. So he's very much a cowardly antagonist in their group and everything. They didn't like him at all. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. Have some fun with your Genlab Alpha. I hope maybe I gave you some ideas. Feel free to plagiarize and everything. I plagiarize movies and stuff like that I use all the time. So thanks for tuning in for the channel. Again, I apologize. I know I went way over my time limit, and my wife is going to go, "You're not supposed to do that." But with these GM, with these GM tips and whatnot and everything, there's just so much to go over. I just can't fit it into 20 minutes. So anyway, thanks for tuning into the most technically inept and boring internet channel. And by God, have some fun with this. This is just such a great game, and I cannot wait to get into the next chapter and everything. But I've really been enjoying Genlab Alpha, and I will see you next time on the interweb. Good night, all.